Okay, hello and welcome to our third and final book club review session on the virtual jug. And this is actually I guess the end to our first book club review ever on the VJug. And with us as usual we have let's introduce Mr. Josh Bloch first of all. Hey Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Excellent. And joining Josh we have Roberto, one of the virtual jug leaders. Hey Roberto.
Hi, Josh and Simon, and also Ivan.
And today you're
Hello.
calling in from Portugal today?
I'm from Portugal, yeah, at the moment.
And is it Lisbon you're from?
No, I'm in Coimbra, actually.
Edinburgh, okay, not
It's
far.
a small city between Lisbon and Porto, actually.
Okay, cool. And who do you support again? Is it Porto or Lisbon? I can't remember. Or
Huh?
Benfica? Is it Benfica or Porto?
Benfica. Benfica is the club.
And finally, but by no means least, we have Ivan Sentinel. How are you, Ivan?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I'm fine. I'm calling from Sofia, from Bulgaria.
Awesome, beautiful city. And how have you guys all been dealing with the heat this week? Has it been right across Europe? Ridiculously hot temperatures?
Yeah, it's been hell, really.
Yeah, for us it just
Um,
started today.
Oh wow.
it's hard to go on the street because it's very hot outside.
Yeah. How about you, Josh? Has there been a heat wave in the US or on the West Coast?
Oh, it's pretty pleasant here. Better than normal, but I wouldn't call it a heat wave.
Yeah.
We do
Well,
have a
last
drought. Does that count?
I guess you're close enough to the Bay Area to really have your own climate anyway, right? It's not really
We have more than one climate. We have microclimates.
nice.
Actually, I've been at Seattle last week, and it was worse there. It's like, I don't know, like 32 or 35 degrees or something. It was like insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, here in the UK we can't deal with hot or cold. It's just some mediocre grey temperature in the middle that we're happy to exist in. Okay, so let's get started then. For those of you watching for those of you who are in the IRC, you're welcome to ask questions to Josh, maybe about the book, maybe about Java in general, maybe, I don't know, maybe about Josh's personal life. Who knows what you're going to ask? And we'll pass them on to Josh, and it's up to Josh whether he wants to answer them, I guess. So
Yeah.
today, yeah, as I mentioned, it's the third edition in this book club's review. So we're doing pages 200 to 300. What have we got in those pages, Roberta?
Yeah, so we are covering general programming, exceptions, and concurrency. Those are the three last big items on the book. But of course, if you want to put questions on all the other sections, you're free to do it. But let's try to focus on all of these, making like a little small conclusion, or not conclusion, but a small detailed discussion what we had on the other two sessions. We discussed a little bit about methods, enums, generics on the second session. On the first one, we discussed a little bit about classes and interfaces, and also about creating the string objects. So we pretty much cover a lot of those things. And for this session, we are happy to have Ivan because, as we mentioned earlier, if you have been accompanying our sessions, we wanted to bring some people from the actual audience on VJug. So we actually got Ivan. He's actually someone that looks into the virtual jugs that's been happening for the last few months very attentively. So we have Ivan here. He has like a couple of questions he wants to put to Josh. So I guess we can start with those. I think he has some awesome questions, and I'm very happy to have him here.
Yeah, maybe I can start with a question. I have a few of them, but maybe I can start with one and let the audience take the time and put their questions in RC or in the chat. And later, if we have some more time, I can ask the other questions. So
Yeah. And before you start, just to let the audience know, if you want to actually come into the live jug and do a question on your own to Josh, you're free to do it. So please whisper me or Simon, and we'll give you the address so you can join us.
Okay,
Go ahead, Ivan.
Josh. Yeah, thank you, Roberto. So my first question concerns item 48 of the book, where Josh discusses that or writes that you shouldn't use double for expressing things like currency, for example. And now there is this JSR 354 about the money and the concurrency API that maybe it's coming in some later version of the JDK, maybe not. But it's even better to use this API instead of big decimal to describe currencies. So, Josh, there are a lot of such APIs that come with a JSR. So, what's your opinion? Should we include or should they include such APIs like the money and concurrency or the units of measurement API? Should they be included in the JDK or like they did for Java?
So this is a complicated one because so two things. First of all, you can almost separate out the two questions of, are floating point types bad for money? Of course they are, and that was the point of that item in effective Java. But then what integral or scaled integral type should you use? And will a currency type pay for itself? No pun intended. And should it be included in the core libraries? Not so sure. Here's why. First of all, types like that are always far more complex than you want them to be because of the hairy nature of currency, what with changing rates, that is relative values of the currencies, and changing currencies when a given currency is legal, and revaluations of currencies and so forth. And how much of that do you want the API to capture? So in my experience, APIs for things like units, that is units of measurement, and currency have been morasses. And in a business that is centered around monetary transactions, they have to be really, really fast. And what I have found various companies doing is simply using longs to represent some appropriate decimal fraction, say millionths of the core currency unit for whatever currency it is, whether it's euros or dollars or what have you. And this way, you're actually passing around primitive objects. And that actually turns out to be a good solution in practice. So the question is it worth the increase in the complexity, that is basically the cognitive, the surface area of the platform, and will people actually use this API in cases where it matters, or will it turn out to be too expensive? And I do believe that it has the potential to be more complex than it might appear on the surface. So you may remember that there have been various attempts at adding kind of units APIs to Java over the years, and they've all basically tanked because they ended up being more complex than people had thought they would be. I think the same thing could happen for a currency API. And even if it succeeds, I think that sort of the big players might not use it simply because it isn't sufficiently efficient. But I should add that there are currently efforts underway to add true value types to Java that have performance comparable to primitives, but flexibility comparable to object reference types. And if that happens, it could change the equation for performance, though not for complexity. So that's a really long non-answer, but I would say if I had to make odds, it's got a 20% chance of succeeding and a 10% chance of getting heavily used.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually not very familiar with the money API, but just out of curiosity, do any of you know if how do they deal with all the currencies around the world? Actually, because I now remember like a funny case because Greece now may actually leave the euro and they may actually create their own coin. So
I don't really know. I mean, I haven't used the API either.
I can tell you that you know, most you know, while I'm unfamiliar with this API, you know, the things I've seen, you've got an enum for all the currencies. That is for each type, and you know, you as I say, you represent the values as longs because some of them are so tiny that you really do need 64 bits. And you know, as for conversions, I don't know how they do it, but clearly it's got to be online. I mean, this is information that you know changes every millisecond, and of course, it is the case that from time to time you have large changes, the introduction of a new currency, the removal of an old currency, and so forth. But yeah, tricky stuff. By the way, let me mention, just in case I vanish, I hope it doesn't happen, but my machine is having a little bit of difficulty, clearly wants to be rebooted. I'm going to try avoiding rebooting it until this thing is over, but in the meantime, I actually can't see you guys. I can hear you, and that's good enough.
okay, we'll try to make it through.
It's one of the many challenges of the virtual jug, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, this machine is usually totally reliable. It's just, it's Murphy's Law, but anyway, that's all right.
But still, as you're mentioning, like having an enum for all the currencies, that seems like a bit tricky because usually if you have some kind of problem with some, well, as I say, I'm remembering about Greece now, they may actually leave euro.
But enums, at least,
and
are highly, you know, were designed to be flexible. That is, you know, you do have to recompile to use a new enumeration, a new value in an enumeration type. And it is the case that if the new value via serialization or whatever makes it to a JVM, a running JVM that does not know about that value, you know, it will blow up. Although it'll blow up nicely. I mean, you'll get an exception basically saying that that's not an eligible value for this enum type as it deserializes. But enums were designed with that in mind. I'm not saying, oh, the whole problem goes away. I'm just saying, you know, at least it fails politely.
no, that's fine. Just seems tricky to roll over like new currencies and new values. Well, new values no, because I'm guessing they're doing something online, but at least rolling new currencies for everyone.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing that, well, usually what that happens is like bank closes and then they open up next day with new currencies.
Right. And the hope is that at the same time as you do that, you know, the program goes down and comes up again with the new currency. But, you know, as we all know, distributed systems do not kind of stop and start atomically. You have to assume you're going to be running with some combination of old and new versions.
Yeah.
Actually, my question was more general. I mean, I mentioned the monetary API just for the money concurrency API just as an example, but my question was general. What do you think about such JSRs like this one? Should they be added to the JDK easily, or what should be the reason to add such a JSR to the JDK, for example, like they did for the dated time API in Java 8? So it's more a general question.
Yeah, and I think the answer is that it should be, you know, not a part of the JDK, but, you know, an extension, standard extension, unless there's a damn good reason for putting it in the JDK. You know, I think the JDK is too darn big as it is, and it doesn't shrink. You know, there are APIs that nobody uses anymore. I won't name any. You know, so as not to offend anyone, but there are APIs that are essentially obsolete, and yet they don't go away. They're with us forever. Well, I can name some. Yeah, thread group. Thread group has been essentially deprecated for a decade, and yet it's with us forever. And the point is that as the conceptual surface area of the platform grows, it becomes less accessible especially to new users, and it becomes more like, let's say, C++, in that every group using the language uses different subset, and it becomes difficult to move from one group to another because it isn't really one language, it's sort of multiple languages. So I would be very careful putting stuff into the core platform, whether it's the language or the JDK, but that's okay. I mean, you can have a JSR whose result is a standard extension rather than a part of the JDK itself.
Okay.
With introduction with Project Jigsaw, shouldn't these problems go away a little at least?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I actually see Project Jigsaw as yet another piece of complexity being added to the system, and it's already confusing people, even though it doesn't exist yet. You look at Java docs, and you see sort of these. And by the way, sadly, I can't bring things up on my machine. I kind of desperately want to reboot my machine because it would help me bring things up so that I could demonstrate. But honestly, I have been fearing the increasing complexity of the platform for years, and I understand that Jigsaw is designed to tear the thing apart into pieces, but at the same time, it doesn't come without cost. So time will tell.
So if you had a yes/no answer as to whether you would like to see Jigsaw in Java, would you say yes or no?
I don't know enough about it to give you a fair answer. I'm gonna demur on giving you an actual answer to that question. I'll just say, well, no, I will say, look, they've been trying to do it for so damn many years, and generally, if something resists being done for years, it's trying to tell you something, and you should drop it. Same thing happened with, let's say, XML literals, and my gosh, am I glad that they did not make it into the language. So yeah, I know it's probably too late, and they're probably coming, but yeah, if I had my druthers, I would stop adding big things to the platform. I would sort of do them in the next incompatible platform that tried to leverage off as much of the effort that had been invested in this platform as possible. I just see this one as getting too big and too complex. And I understand that that's a controversial opinion, but it is my opinion.
Yeah, Ivan, you can ask your next question.
Really? Nothing on the.
Oh, you can do it. It's fine.
Okay. Then my next question concerns item 51, and it suggests that the string concatenation operator, the plus, should not be used, but developers should rather use a string builder.
You're overstating my. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt briefly. It should be used for the purposes for which it was designed. I mean, it's fine to use to concatenate several things in a single piece of output, but it should not be abused. Is really, I think, the point of that essay. If you've got, if you're making a really long string by concatenating, arbitrarily many things, yeah, it'll get you into trouble.
Yeah, what I wanted to comment here is that, at least to my understanding, it's implemented under the hood with string builder. So you suppose that we should use string builder. Now, last week I read a blog from.
It's implemented with string builder, but this was actually written in response to a specific pattern that I saw cropping up in various places and being emulated, where people were writing billing statements, and they were appending each line item by using the string concatenation operator. And these building statements had hundreds of items in them. And they were making a string, an actual string, that had a reference to it at each step along the way. And provably that's quadratic.
Mm.
So,
yeah, so what I wanted to comment here is that I read a blog last week from Antonio Gonçalves where he compared, I think, 7 different ways to concatenate strings, and the plus, including Guava and Apache Commons and other libraries, and so he was using JMH for comparing the performance, and according to his comparison, the plus operator was performing best. I mean, it was giving the biggest number of operations per second. Or
I believe it. I believe it so long as you're using it for what it was designed for. If you're concatenating a reasonably small number of things whose total length is reasonable, you will observe that. But if you're using the plus operator to concatenate, 1,000,000 strings, each of which is 100 elements, and you're doing it by sequential calls, statement equals statement plus line item, you'll do way better with a string builder because the string builder will be linear and the plus operator will be quadratic. You can try this test afterwards. In fact, anyone who wants to nail me can try it right now and report back during the meetup. But I firmly believe that that's going to be, it won't even be close.
So to put it like this, we should avoid using the plus equals operator many times.
Yeah.
Many statements.
Yeah. And as I say, many of the things in effective Java were written in response to specific bad practices that I saw cropping up in programs and in teaching materials and so forth. And this one was very real. It was there. People were doing it, and I wanted to stop it. So, I'll reread the essay, and hopefully I've made that clear. I'm not trying to diss the use of the plus operator when you are kind of, let us say, just writing a 2-string operation for something that's kind of small. It's concise, and obviously I don't believe in premature optimization. So if it's the most concise way to express what you want to do, by all means use it. But I think that when you are building something of potentially large size, you're better off using a string builder. And the other thing is, I haven't read the post in question. If you could send it to me, that'd be great. Don't even try IM. As I say, my machine is sick. I'd really, in fact, if we have a moment, I would. Well, you know what I can do? I can grab another machine. That's a great idea. I'm gonna run out and grab a laptop in a few seconds. But that said, keep in mind what Cliff Click always says about performance measurements in benchmarks in particular, that it's incredibly difficult to do right, even when you're using a tool like JMH. And in his experience, virtually no benchmark he's ever seen is measuring what its author is attempting to measure on the first out. You have to kind of go over it and then figure out what you're really measuring. So, I would say take it with a grain of salt, not because of anything in particular about this benchmark, but because of something about all benchmarks. I'd love to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Sure, we will send you that.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to have like 2 minutes to restart your machine and get better, you can wait. It's fine.
Yeah. Thanks. Let me try and do that. Okay.
In the meantime, Roberto, you better start telling some jokes or something.
Yeah, Roberto, you tell jokes. I'll be back as quickly as I can.
I'll try. It's not going to be easy.
So this Java developer, a C# developer, and a Haskell developer walked into a bar. I'll leave one of you two to provide the punchline for that.
No, I mean, you started it. You have to finish it up.
Okay.
I hope I'm not the C# developer.
So why don't we talk about the book club in general, Roberto?
Yeah, so we will love to have your comments about this first book. This is the first time we are doing this, so we're not sure if you're following the right model. We will love to have your comments to try to improve it in the future. We're probably gonna put like a second pool for 5 or 6 books for the next review. We're not sure which books we're gonna put there yet, but you are free to suggest them.
Yeah, and I think this time it'll probably be. I mean, last time when I put the books out, I guess it was just like a splattering of all different types of books. It might be nice maybe to pick a theme and then pick a bunch of books around a specific theme. So, you know, whether it's something on performance, something on productivity, something on libraries, something on whatever, Java EE. Or soft skills
as well. Soft skills probably could be something useful that usually we don't have much in conferences with Java or even here in Rejag. So can probably be useful for developers like us to have some kind of idea of soft skills and even make people read the book and then take their questions on the author of the book.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we can probably send something around to the VJug group to see their thoughts on.
All right, good to go. Thanks, guys.
Oh, awesome.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
So,
okay,
so
are you okay, Josh, now?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. So I'm actually gonna go with a couple of questions here from one of our viewers. He actually emailed us these questions before the audience because I think he couldn't come. So this is from Janusz Cyprian. So one of the questions is he's asking you, Josh, if you're planning to release any Java libraries in the future, something like Guava or Lombok, something that you think that you can offer to the Java world to provide some encapsulation to existing features, or even actually release new features to the platform. But I'm guessing that during our previous discussion about adding new specs, you're probably not very fan of it, right?
Well, look, I have nothing against adding stuff that isn't part of the platform, and then if people use it enough and like it enough, it can work its way in. The other thing is I continue to, though not to the extent that I used to work with people like Doug Lee on the work that he's doing. So I think, yeah, it seems likely that I will be adding to the platform in the future. I don't know under exactly what context, or what I'll be adding, but it seems entirely possible. Well, when I say adding to the platform, adding to it or supplementing it. But yeah, I think I'll probably be doing that. I think that before I do that, I'll be writing the 3rd edition of the book. So
yeah, can you provide us with the ideas that you want to add into the language or into the platform, and even when you have a
that's actually
your first book?
An interesting point, right? So there are things I would absolutely add to the language, and I'd probably still add them to the language. But as I kind of said last time, I sort of wish they'd gone in instead of other things that have higher conceptual weight that affect the language in deeper ways. There are superficial things that the language is missing, and it bothers me every day. So for example, collections literals. The difficulty in actually making a little tiny collection in Java compared to doing it in any of the sort of, I don't know, Python-like languages is it's a pain and it's unnecessary. And there are a few other things like that I have on a laundry list of just annoyances, things that make Java more verbose and could be fixed without increasing the conceptual surface area of the language. They would just provide a more concise syntax for something that you can already do in the language. And I'd love to see that one. There are others, you know, I forget what they are, but if they come to mind in the next few minutes, I'll mention them.
Okay, is that the top one that you would like to see, collection literals?
I'm going to say yes for now, but that's only because I can't think of any others. There may be others. As I say, I should have prepared for this. Should have made a list if I'd known you were going to ask me that question. But
it's fine. Don't worry. You can always answer it on Twitter, or we can have you in another session looking into the future of Java.
I'll give you another example, by the way. A little thing, but it's like, to me, inexcusable that the language does not have byte literals, right? So the only way to make a byte in Java is to use an int literal, and then you kind of get an automatic cast to byte, assuming the size is within a certain range. But the moment that 8th bit is set, it won't do the conversion for you automatically. So if you have an array which is initialized to bytes, you know, you need byte casts for any element of the array that happens to be greater than, well, I shouldn't say greater than, because bytes are signed. It's a botch that bytes were signed. This is the sort of reason I think you kind of really need a new language. Like, you know, bytes shouldn't be signed. It would be great if one could fix that. But I suspect that it would break too many existing programs to change it in midstream. But, you know, at the very least, it should be possible to, you know, having primitive types for which there are no literals is just a bummer. And it's
would you consider doing anything with the OpenJDK? Is that anything that's ever interested you, or not? So this is actually another question.
A little bit of a raw area. I don't think the OpenJDK is open. You know, if I believed that people running it really believed in open source software, I'd feel a bit differently about it. But
yeah, there's a lot of discussion about this actually, just on the Java Champions users list, about how I think it was Google. I can't remember which feature it was, but they put in a huge amount of effort for some feature, and it's a case of, you know, Oracle sometimes not taking that in, and it does seem a barrier, which I think people are beginning to look at now. I don't think it'll ever necessarily get anywhere, you know, into a particularly open state like a true open project. But I totally see where you're coming from with that concern as well.
I'll go one step further, by the way, which is, you know, if you have a genuine open source project, and like if you have something that's GNU licensed, and then someone does something that, you know, you believe violates the GNU license, you politely tell them, and, you know, they fix it. You don't sue them for billions of dollars. So, you know, I just, as I say, it's never felt very open to me.
Yeah, because I think one of the kind of rules, if you wanted to contribute something to the OpenJDK as a big feature, is that you provide a team that's also there to be able to support that feature, and it's kind of, yeah, it's a very convoluted kind of way just to be able to, you know, contribute code to make the platform better. But.
Yeah, and you also have to remember, I have contributed tons of code to the OpenJDK, and you also have to look where it's gotten me. Hint, Tim Sort, you know. So basically, I have issues with it at the moment.
Okay. So keeping up with the questions, also from Jurasco Cyprian, he is also wondering if, well, you has been part of the core development team, also very linked with Java SE. Have you any plans to also look into other editions of Java, namely Java E and all the other specs related to Java E? Or you don't care about Java E at all?
My answer is no. You know, it's been around for, you know, decades, or over a decade at any rate, and I actually came from an enterprise environment to what was then JavaSoft, partially to escape the complexity of enterprise environments. And, you know, I think it's great that other people want to do it, you know, they have my blessings, but it's not for me. I like small platforms. I like programming in C because the entire manual is that big, and you could learn it all in a couple hours. And I like Java for similar reasons. He does not have that.
Do you think Spring helps the situation in reducing the complexity, or do you think it just moves things from the platform into a kind of bundled application and the architecture's just differently wrong?
I'm really not qualified to say. I don't like pontificating on things that I haven't used.
Okay, so actually, I have a question here that was actually a little bit linked to what we were discussing earlier. So Jane is asking if Josh is familiar with Groovy, and if yes, what do you think about it? Its many features to reduce the verbosity of Java code.
I'm not terribly familiar with Groovy, so once again, sorry, I don't feel really comfortable saying anything about it because I might make a fool of myself.
Ah, it's fine. So Ivan, you seem a little unhappy there. Do you want to throw on one of your other questions?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so item 53 of the book, it talks about reflection. And now, as of Java 7, we have method handles that are used for various parts. Now, would you recommend using method handles everywhere reflection was used? Or do you know that whether there are some parts where reflection should be used instead of method handles?
Method handles are a lower level entity, albeit a more powerful entity. But no, I don't think you should use them everywhere you used to use reflection. There are things for which reflection works pretty much perfectly, and you might as well use it where it works. Method handles were designed to solve a particular problem, which was to allow more flexibility in method invocation. You don't need them if, let us just say, you are writing a test framework, which is reflectively iterating over the methods in class and deciding which ones to execute and getting the results of those method invocations. So I think you should use the right tool for the right job. You shouldn't use the new tool because it exists.
And which is the right job for the reflection?
Well, reflection is designed to process programs at runtime, right? To basically to, as its name would imply, reflect upon programs. And when that's what you want to do, for example, because you're writing tooling, whether it be documentation generation or task framework or what have you, reflection works like a charm. So as I say, I think kind of when you're doing general purpose metaprogramming, reflection should be your first choice. And if it turns out not to be powerful enough for what you're doing, maybe you need to extend it by using other APIs.
Okay.
You can keep going, Ivan. I know you have a couple more.
Nobody wants to ask questions in the chat?
We have other questions. Don't worry, but you just keep going.
Yeah, let's ask them first.
Okay. So we have a question here about one of the last topics of the book about serialization stuff. So this is Maldivia. So you're asking about the constant serializable tags when adding new stuff. For instance, with Java 8 lambdas can be serializable.
So, sorry, I didn't exactly get the question. Java 8 lambdas can be serializable.
Yeah. And what do you think about the constant serializable tags when adding new stuff?
Oh yeah, it's awful. I mean, I think that so the book sort of says use serialization judiciously. All other things being equal, I think when you're adding a new type, it should not be serializable unless you have a good reason to make it so. If it's a fundamental value type, sure, it's got to be serializable. If you're going to, be passing around, whatever it is, a table or something like that, and I can see why they made lambdas serializable. It's like you want to be able to pass around kind of units of execution so they can be executed remotely. That was sort of a fundamental part of what they were trying to do. It's hard, I mean, especially, so suppose you've got closures that meaningfully close over their environment and you serialize them. That means you have to send the environment over along with the lambda. And there's a reason that Java lambdas, are limited in how much stuff they can close over, as in only final and effectively final variables, which I think is clever. And without it, serialization would be damn near impossible. So I think that it's kind of it's an unfortunate tax, but it's there and you have to think about it. But it is an optional tax. You can opt out of it by just saying, okay, this thing is not going to implement serializable, and generally speaking, you should probably do that.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing, which is you can always add it and you can never take it away. You can say, yeah, we really do need to serialize this, so in the next version it will implement serializable. Whereas if you elected to do it and it turns out to be a nightmare, you can't say, no, it doesn't, because you break existing programs that were already serializing and deserializing instances. And it's not just a tax on creating new types, it's a hideous tax on maintaining them, because you sort of have this quadratic problem, right, where anytime you serialize an instance in one version, you have to be able to deserialize it in any version greater than or equal to the version in which it was introduced, which means you have this, quadratically large triangular matrix of versions. In fact, it's not triangular, it's square, because you have to test serialization in both directions, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a royal pain in the ass to make sure that serialization and deserialization works properly across every pair of versions.
Indeed. Okay, Ivan, feel free to ask your next question.
Thank you, Roberto. So my next question concerns the exceptions. So not particular item, but exception as a whole. So you mentioned that the checked exceptions should be used when they're thrown for a condition which can be recovered from the client code. At the same time, there are a lot of people that say that adding checked exception to the language was a mistake. And they give, as an example, existing frameworks in Java or Java EE, and even other modern languages that don't have check exception. And so what's your opinion on this? Was it a mistake or?
Very good question. It's not one with an easy answer. I don't think that the concept of checked exceptions is fundamentally broken, but I think it was already dead when it came out of the gate because they were so massively overused in the core libraries. I'll point to, I/O exception as Exhibit A. All I/O exceptions are checked, and then I'll point to interrupted exception as Exhibit B. If they're nothing but a thorn in your side that you have to sort of deal with and ignore all the time, then they lose their power. If they were used very rarely, I think they could have been a powerful tool. But I think that it's going to be, decades before anyone tries them again, if in fact they ever try them again, because they were such a disaster in Java. I think the disaster was caused as much by the library design. Keep in mind that when Java was released, it was, you remember when they talked about the internet and dog years and all that? Basically, people were working around the clock to get this thing out, and they couldn't sort of polish every rough edge off the libraries. And I think had the initial libraries displayed best practices for using checked exceptions, maybe it could have been a successful feature. But realistically, if you look at the amount of hatred out there on the web for checked exceptions, they have to be declared not one of the most successful features in the language. And I can't imagine any language today using checked exceptions, any new language.
Yeah, and you as an API designer, when you design a new API, do you use checked exceptions?
Absolutely. They're in the language. I might as well use them, but I try to use them properly. I throw them very rarely. I throw them when, it really is supposed to be a red flag to the user of the API. It is supposed to say, there's something that can happen here that I want you to be aware of and I want you to deal with if it happens. If I can honestly say to myself as an API designer, this is one case where the user of my API must take action. If this fails, I'll use a checked exception.
Do you create your own exceptions, or are you confined only to the JDK ones?
I create my own exceptions, but I extend the JDK ones whenever it makes sense. Simple example, illegal state exception, illegal argument exception. Those to me, and those ones aren't checked, they're unchecked, but to me, those are the fundamental ways to express precondition violations. If you can't call this method because the receiver is in the wrong state, I will extend illegal state exception. If you can't call it because one of the arguments is broken, I will extend illegal argument exception unless one of the existing illegal argument exceptions, such as index out of bounds exception, describes precisely the condition. So, and I think I say that in here as well, that you should make use of the existing exceptions. You should extend them where necessary. I hate it when I see people creating a new exception when an existing JDK exception perfectly expresses what they want to express when they throw it.
Yeah. One of the things, by the way, that I was really puzzled as a junior developer years ago was whether I should throw null pointer exception or not. And after I read your book, you said it's perfectly okay to throw null pointer exception. So that answers my question as a junior developer.
That one is somewhat controversial. I agree. That's my opinion totally. There are some people who say you should throw illegal argument exception if someone passes in null where it's not allowed. But I think that that because the libraries pretty much uniformly throw null pointer exception under those circumstances, you should too. Generally speaking, I think that when you are extending a platform, as you are when you're writing new libraries for a platform that comes with core libraries, you should obey the same patterns that the core libraries demonstrate, because then users of the core libraries will be able to use your libraries easily.
So, keeping up on the exception side, we also have a question here related with from Sajal. So he's commenting, saying that sometimes it can be seen that rather than handling error by wrapping it by exception as soon as it's found, exception bubble up is done by throwing the exact exception. Is it not better to handle the error as soon as it's found?
So I think it's generally better to bubble it up. That is, I think you should not necessarily throw the exact exception. Maybe you should wrap it. I think you should throw an exception appropriate to your abstraction, right? So the example I always give is if you're implementing a telephone directory and you happen to be storing the phone numbers in a SQL database, under no circumstances should you be throwing SQL exceptions, because what if you substitute in a different NoSQL database in a future edition? You shouldn't have to change the exceptions that you throw, because that's part of your API. But I think that it is an anti-pattern to have try, catch, print, stack, trace, die. Just throw the exception in hopes that someone further up the call chain can either do something useful, or we can at least centralize the code to print the stack, trace, and die. And by the way, one way to centralize it is just to have your main method throw it, if you're going to do that. I also think that in production, certainly if you're writing client software, not that there's a lot of client software in Java, but if you're writing client software, you should never throw a stack trace. You should be writing error messages that are meaningful to your user, and the user of a piece of client software doesn't want to see a stack trace.
Yeah. Ivan, I know you have a couple more questions. Feel free to do them.
Maybe you could ask something from the chat because there's not too much time and I already asked 4.
No, it's fine. We brought you here for this.
Okay, thank you. So I have actually one last question, and it's about the so-called Sentinel values.
Sentinel values, you say?
Sentinel values, at least this is the term that I
Yes.
or you call them distinguished values, and it's again in the chapters of the exception, but it's not connected. My question is not connected so much with the exceptions, but rather you know Project Valhalla and the value types that it's researching and probably will bring to us in Java 10. And there, for the value types,
I actually don't know Project Valhalla. What is it?
yeah, it's a project that researches things like value types in Java and primitives in generics and enhanced array types.
Got it. This is the one that we were talking about. Basically,
yes,
the value types and so forth. Yep.
Yes. So when we talk about value types, what do you think a distinguished or Sentinel value should be? What should be picked up as a Sentinel value for a value type? For example, if we talk about integers, for example, let's start with ints and then go on with something like the value type point.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it. I'm not even sure they should have them. In fact, I think they shouldn't have them. They definitely shouldn't have them. I think it's a mistake. I think you could have an extended version that has them, or maybe a boxed version that has them if you're willing to pay the price. But the problem is, if you have them, code sort of breaks left and right in ways that you wouldn't like it. So let's take a look at the ints. The ints are integer arithmetic mod 2 to the 32, and because of that, the values are all very predictable. Even with that, we have problems where people don't understand the vagaries of 2's complement arithmetic and the fact that there is a distinguished value that is its own negation, integer.min value. But when I compare that to the doubles that have a Sentinel value nan built in, I understand why it was done. The numerical analysts like it, but it destroys the algebraic properties of the type. You no longer have, in the case of nan, you don't have. Sorry, the words aren't with me. It's been too long since I took algebra. But an equivalence relation is reflexive, transitive, and symmetric. And in this case, it's not reflexive, right? It is not true that x equals x for every double value. Nan is unequal to nan. And they'll protest, well, but nan isn't a double value. Yes, it is. It is a value that an item of type double should have. So I'm not sure if I believe that Sentinel values, in fact, I know they shouldn't be part of the type in its most basic form. I should be able to pass along so null pointer exceptions are a pain in the butt, right? Why ask for more of them? I love the idea of a type, all of whose instances are legitimate, a type without null. And if you want to add the existence of a Sentinel, that's fine. But I hope that they aren't there in every pseudo-primitive type, in every value type. Does that answer your question at all?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, we are almost up for this last session. We have, I think we have a last question here about synchronization and scheduling in thread, so it's actually cool. So this is actually about item 72, don't depend on the thread scheduler. Mm-hmm. So Dave B is mentioning that this item contains a lot of don't do's, but not a lot of guidance on how to deal with cases where we can reduce the number of runnable threads. Any suggestion how to handle these cases in a portable way?
which cases? I'm actually a little bit, I don't exactly get the question. I understand that yes, if you've got a lot of runnable threads, then you are implicitly depending on, well, yeah, if they're all runnable at the same time, you're implicitly depending on the thread scheduler. And I suppose one way to deal with it is to don't make your own threads, but instead use thread pools. And I don't mean thread pools, but use the executor framework, right? And then basically the underlying executor framework can sort of keep the number of executable threads in line with what the underlying machine has to offer, and can sort of be responsible for doling out the work to the executors. So I guess on reflection, that's my answer to the question. If you're having problems with too many executable threads, try to let someone else, namely the executor framework, take care of the threads for you.
Okay, awesome. Actually, I'm going to make you one last question that I found here on the RC, which is a very fun question from Puzzle Duck. It'll be our final question for the session and for all the book reading club, for this book at least. So, Josh, if you're stuck in a desert island and you could take 3 Java classes with you, which one will you take?
All right. Keeping in mind that this answer is, completely a function of how I'm feeling right now, and if you ask me at a different time, I might give you a different answer. And keeping in mind also that there are dependencies. So the first one I'm going to say is ArrayDeck. ArrayDeck is really nice because it's everything, right? It's a good deck, it's a good stack, it's a good queue, and it's a good vector. It's all of those things, and it's efficient at being all of those things. So it's like a wonderful collection class. So that's one. And then I need a map. Generally speaking, it doesn't have to be sorted. So that means either it's going to be a hash map or concurrent hash map, and I'll take concurrent hash map because it's almost it would be linked hash map or concurrent hash map, but I would take concurrent hash map. So that's 2. And let's see, what's the third one I'd take? Well, I'll take strings so I can print stuff out. You kind of
you need something to put on the collections as well.
Yeah, right. You need something to put in, and you need some way to print stuff out. So I'll take those 3. And keep in mind that this is a ridiculous question, because if you simply take the transitive closure of the types required to implement those 3 types, you're going to get many, many, many types. But anyway, we'll take those 3.
Yeah, don't forget about dependencies. I mean, it was an awesome answer anyway. And it was as a joke question. I guess that was fun at least. Okay, guys, I think we're done for this session. So once again, we want to thank Josh for being here with us, not only for this session, but for all the other sessions that we had before. We are waiting for your next book, and hopefully we can make a new book reading club with our new book discussing with the new stuff of Java 8 and even 9 that you may include on your new book. So we hope that you get into work as fast as you can, and let us know when you have it ready, and we are more than happy to bring you here again and we discuss it again on the new topics and the new themes and have new questions for you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And yeah, I totally agree with what Roberto said. It's awesome to have you here, not just for one session, but for all 3. So we really appreciate you spending the time and out of your day to come join us and talk to the community. That was very, very much appreciated. Also, thank you very much to Ivan for joining us on our third session. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you for inviting me, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and
It's my pleasure.
Next time for the next book club, you can be here. So let us know, me and Simon, and we can bring you on board and have you ask the questions that you want to make to the author.
Thank you.
Great idea, and of course, thank you to Roberto for running the last few sessions. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the virtual jug as a jug leader these days. So thank you very much to Roberto.
Here, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you.
No worries. So yeah, just to remind people who haven't seen the previous sessions, maybe they're all live, as will this one be on virtualjug.com. And we have our next session, which is going to be a session on Cassandra, and that's next week on July 15th. So if you're interested in Cassandra, then do check that out. We'll be in touch with the VJug community to ask about which the new book you would like to review next, and we'll work on a date on that as well about when we would like to run that. And I guess until next time, thanks again to everyone for joining, particularly to Josh, and see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.
Send us your comments, guys. Bye bye.